The following is a Frank R. Wilson presentation. Welcome to the podcast that is making learning great again. Your source for straightforward advice from those that are great leaders and entrepreneurs. No PowerPoint slides or behavioral models here. Just simple, real-world solutions to your leadership development needs. If you're looking for the latest trends from today's gurus, look elsewhere. But if you want to learn from those that have done what you want to do, you've found it. It's time for License to Coach. I'm your host, Frank R. Wilson. Let's dive on in. Welcome to our first podcast. We're just so excited to get started on this journey, to share knowledge from people like you who have made a successful career as a leader or an entrepreneur. Our guest today is technically retired, but you'd never know it. His past includes stints in radio marketing and insurance, railroads, all sorts of things, and he was also a branch manager for a Fortune 500 company. Now happily retired, he is busier than ever with his work in acting and voiceover work as well as photography, where he's won numerous awards. Please join me in welcoming Rick Lecompte to the program. Well, hi, Rick. I'm glad you could join us today. Welcome to License to Coach.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. I really appreciate being here.
Full disclosure, Rick and I are friends, and in the process of having formed a friendship, I've learned a lot about his earlier career, and I'm really quite impressed with it. And so I thought he'd be a terrific guest to have on our program. I was wondering, Rick, if you could you just kind of give us a brief history of your leadership journey and how you've gotten to, you're retired currently, but how you got worked up to that retirement space, all the different leadership roles that you have. Can you kind of summarize that for us?
Yeah, Frank, I can. It's somewhat of a little long list, but it started out with when I was on the swim team in high school, which I have a funny story that maybe we can get to. And then after that, I went to work on the railroad, and I did that for about 20 years. And then I became a commodity broker. And then from that, I moved into radio. Started out as a sales guy, ended up running 8 stations. And then I wrapped up my career with insurance, which was the most rewarding thing that I think I probably did.
Boy, those are not necessarily related industries, are they?
No. Well, it's like I used to tell my staff all the time, especially the young folks, is that stay curious.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. And it's even though they weren't related industries, I'm guessing that your prior experiences helped serve you well in your new jobs.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's mainly about establishing expectations, a vision for yourself, most importantly, so that way you know where you're leading to,
yeah.
and then define the consequences, both positive and negative, and then everything works out.
Well, tell me about your first leadership position. I'm kind of curious about that. Maybe talk to me about that and anything that you learned from that first experience, mistakes or things you did well. I'd be curious.
Okay, well, sure. Well, first one, the tiny short story when I said the swim team in high school.
Right.
We snuck into, we were all a bunch of high school boys in Arizona. We snuck into the Playboy Club. It was the middle of the afternoon and nobody was there. And we were in the dressing room and all of a sudden we heard a noise and everybody was thrashing around. Oh. And I said, follow me. And they all followed me and I opened a door and went in and everybody piled in behind me. I led us into a closet. I broke out laughing. I went out, turned out I was a janitor. He thought it was funny we were there. And so that was my first leadership. You got to know where you're going.
That's a good lesson to learn from that. Well, I mean, did you meet any Playboy Bunnies as a result?
No. But hope springs eternal. But my first real position as a leader was on the railroad. Believe it or not, at 20 years old, I got promoted to a conductor on the Illinois Central Railroad. Yeah, they hadn't hired anybody or promoted anybody for about 15 years. And then I came along, they hired me, and then they hired, 25 people after me in about the next 6 years. And so I was able to evolve into a conductor. And what I learned there is because I was working with guys who had been there for 20, 30 years.
Ooh, that's not easy.
Yeah, what I really learned was that it wasn't about big me and little you. It was about how are we going to do this together? Knowing that they knew more than I did. So I was very comfortable with saying, what would you like to do in this circumstance? What makes the most sense to you? So I was always getting input from people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was extremely helpful.
I've seen it in my career that a lot of times, for whatever reason, sometimes the smartest guy in the company is the one that gets the promotions, and yet that's not necessarily the person who's in the best position to effectively lead people. It's not necessarily about all this technical knowledge, and your experience there with the train almost kind of proves that to me.
Yeah, I would agree.
Now I'm curious. I have this vision in my mind, but what does a conductor actually do? I'm curious.
Well, you're the boss of the train. Everybody thinks it's the engineer. It's not. It's the conductor, and your job is to decide, what it is, because you get a list of things to do with railroad cars, when to leave places, when to stay at places, when to duck in off the main line into the sidings. And then you're responsible for getting that work done efficiently. It was a great time in my life. Like I said, I did it for 20 years.
Yeah, and you also stepped into a situation that it's been my experience, and I've seen it too, that when you have other people that have far more experience than you, and also probably have been at the company longer than you, that's not an easy role to step into. Did you consciously say to yourself, I'm going to make sure I solicit information and ask questions because of my position and how I got here? Was that a conscious decision?
No, it wasn't a conscious decision. It was pretty much I was scared to death because I knew that was the situation. And the other thing is I didn't have anything to prove. One of the things that happens with people who move into leadership positions, they really have this idea that it's all about I'm the boss. Okay, well, that's the lowest level. That's a position level, and after position level, there's the permission level where people will follow you because they want to. And then there's production level, which has to do with actually having some credibility in the things that you're doing. And then after that, it's and this is maybe the most important thing, and that's to develop people. Because the idea of true leadership, and I know this may sound corny, but it's absolutely true. A real leader doesn't develop followers. A real leader develops other leaders.
Nothing corny about that.
Yeah. And then after that, people will follow you out of respect because you have a proven track record.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And as I've told people, my audience probably knows that I've done leadership development for a number of years. And one of the things I always used to say was that your job is to find your replacement and develop them, because that's the only way you're going to be able to move on. And that's essentially kind of in the same spirit of what you're saying. So that's great.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that too, Frank.
Let's go into some of your other jobs first, I guess. So from a conductor at the train, you went to, remind me again?
After I was a conductor, I went, I was a commodity trader. And I started out as a trader just for myself.
Right.
Because I was working on the railroad. I was hauling all this corn and soybeans. I was wondering where it went. So I started investigating that, staying curious. There's no other way to say it, did really well. And then I got asked to become part of the company. And then after that, with continued success, is that I started managing accounts for people. So that was certainly an interesting thing because I didn't know what I was doing. Making it up as I go along is a common trait in me, Frank. I know you know. So the first thing I had to do is I had to achieve credibility by doing research. I had to find out stuff. I mean, of all these things, you always have to find out stuff. And then after that, you have to have a knowledge of the fact that you're actually producing results.
Yeah. And what I find fascinating is probably an entirely not only a different industry, but an entirely different environment. basically blue collar to white collar, I would guess.
Oh yeah.
And was that adjustment difficult?
No, it was just a change of clothes, and I went in because I wanted. Every change I ever made, it's because I wanted to. And so if you want to, then you just do it.
Yeah. And if I understood correctly, when you first started it, you were essentially in business for yourself?
Yes.
So what prompted you to take that leap from 20 years of getting a steady paycheck to all of a sudden going into business for yourself? I mean, it sounds like a kind of a scary, risky move.
It was. Matter of fact, my dad worked on the railroad, as did my grandfather and
Oh, wow.
my great grandfather and uncles and cousins and all of that long railroad family. And when I left the railroad, my dad was super mad.
Wow.
It was probably about 6 months before he would actually have a real conversation with me rather than a short little answer the question conversation.
Right.
But then as things progressed and life became really good, is that I think I actually impressed my dad finally. Yeah, but it was indeed quite the change.
So and then from that you actually became part of the firm that you were kind of subcontracting to, I guess.
Yes, yeah, because a commodity trader, you're out there by yourself doing stuff, because it's all up to you. Win or lose, it's all up to you, which I like. And then becoming part of the firm, then it was acquiring clients yourself, and then bringing them in, and then making them successful. Because that's another big part of leadership. It's not about you being successful. If you make others successful, they'll make you successful.
Yeah.
So having them being successful, was very important. And then that went pretty well, and I did that for a couple of years. And then I saw people make a lot of money and then lose it all. And so I saw that repeatedly. And so all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute here, things had gone pretty good. And so I went in one day and resigned.
Wow.
Which is a big shock, because I didn't want to do what I'd seen so much of.
Well, but I mean, what you're saying is true. I mean, it's basically legalized gambling in a way. I mean, I don't mean that as a negative or an insult, but I mean, that's what it is.
Fortunately, there are a lot of people who consider it gambling, rather than structured investigation and work. And the people that consider it gambling lose their money. And
true.
And the people that treat it as a profession make the money.
Yeah. So you resigned from that, and then, if memory serves me right, that's when you got into insurance, correct?
No, I got into the radio business after that.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, one of the guys that used to come in all the time was talking about buying a radio station. A younger guy, but certainly plausible. And he was going to buy this radio station, and he asked me if I would be interested in coming and being a sales manager for this little 2 stations in central Illinois, where I used to say that the light bulbs had more wattage than we did. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Then that's when I resigned my position, as I mentioned, and then he didn't show up for the closing and disappeared from the face of the earth.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so now I'd officially at that point left the railroad. I was married, wife, kid, and left the other company and turned all my accounts over. And all of a sudden, I didn't have anything. And so the guy that owned the radio stations, he said, "Well, you can come to work as a sales guy if you want to." And so I did. I went there, and then it turned out I was there the first day, and nobody was there. The second day, nobody was there except the secretary and the jocks. And then, so the second day, I asked at the end of the day, I asked the secretary, "So where's Dave and all the rest of the people?" They said, "Oh, didn't they tell you? They're over in Indianapolis. They're in bankruptcy court. The station's bankrupt."
Oh,
and it was like, what? So there was a chance to learn things again. And so I just started studying, as I've done with everything, and encourage that to everybody. And then at the bankruptcy hearing about 3 weeks later, I had managed to hire some people. Important thing always, the right people for the right job.
Right.
Hire some people, and we started bringing in money. And so when the attorney for the other side said, "And what are you doing about shutting the company or shutting the station down?" I said, "Nothing." And I looked over at Dave and I said, "Dave, we got it on the run. We're going to do this. Don't do this. We can save this." Well, turned out he was too deep.
Oh.
So he ended up being able to sell it to a rich kid whose dad bought the station for him as a present. And then so we just started working at it and working, because I wasn't kidding. We were saving it and built it up from 2 stations to 3 stations to 5 stations till eventually we had 8 stations, and we pretty much dominated central Illinois, part of Indiana. And we were one of the first people ever to bounce signals off a satellite. We had to have the equipment built for us.
Huh.
And so, so that was an exciting ride too.
I bet. How long were you doing that for?
I did that for about 8.5 years.
And time.
Yeah, and then the most important thing about that was that since I didn't know anything, is that I learned and learned and learned. If I wasn't working, I was learning. And then when I would hire people, I would have them learn the same stuff that I was learning. And I mean that they're good old book learning. And I'm talking about experiences, getting back and debriefing at the end of the days, so that way you can, because if you grow your people who are part of your team, then you end up growing yourself at the same time.
In other words, I think what you're saying is how the words that come to mind to me is for continuous learning is really a key to success, whether it be leadership or not.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Well, and then after radio, then I did get into insurance because I left the radio station over in. There was some ethical things that I didn't approve of, so I left there out of the blue one day, and then I saw an ad that said, "Do you like sales? If so, call this number." And I called, and it turned out it was a company that was an insurance company. So I interviewed with them, went well, ended up going to work as an insurance salesperson, not house and car. Long-term care, Medicare supplements, annuities, more financial kind of stuff. So I did that, and then again, learning. And then my boss, the branch manager right then, who was the same kind of leader I'm talking about, is that care for your people. They're not the help, your friends who you work with. But he said, I found this thing called the Life Underwriting Training Council, and they had these great courses, lots of them. And so I went and I said to Mike, I found this course, and he said, are you interested? I said, yeah. He said, are you really interested? I said, yeah. And he said, okay, well, hold on. I'll get back with you in about a week. And he got back with me in a week. And he said, Rick, now you're really sure about this? I said, yep. And he said, okay, here's when the course is going to be. And here's the location it's going to be. I said, great. He said, oh, and he handed me this great big 3-inch thick manual. And he says, oh, by the way, you're teaching it. That's a true story. And so my first big exhaustive course in insurance was one that I taught. And boy, you talk about in between the weekly class, you talk about study time. That was it. Yeah. And so then I ended up as a Life Underwriting Training Council fellow and a certified long-term care consultant and a certified senior advisor and a number of other things.
That's a great way to. That was one of the things I know that Stephen Covey always talked about is the best way to learn something is that once you do kind of gain that information is to teach it to others, and that just helps internalize it even more.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's also something that in my situation for seeing how that worked by surprise is that all through the rest of my career is that. I often had people teach stuff. Now, nothing that massive, but they were always teaching other people because again, you don't grow followers, you grow leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. Did did you find that was there any one particular attribute or skill that you would have as a leader that basically served you well in all those different roles?
Uh, yes, and that's it's it's knowing where you were leading to, not just some nebulous thing. Oh, we're going to be a success. Okay,
Right.
ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Um, that, but it's knowing where you're leading to, and then write it down. Start out with I think it's called back of the envelope, where you write down 6 points of what it is you're going to do. Because if you can't describe what you're going to do on the back of an envelope, then all you're interested in is verbiage. So it's figuring out what you're going to do, and then how you're going to do it. And by doing that, you have written down clear things for you to do, and then also, and equally as important, if not more important, clear expectations for you want the people that you hire to do.
Yeah.
And then when they come in, you can go over those expectations. Not just here, read this and get back to me and sign off on triplicate and here and give a copy to some. No, you sit down with them, go over. So here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I expect you to do. And then do you agree to this stuff? So that way later on, if it doesn't work out, that there's no emotion in this. It's like, hey, here's a sheet of paper. Remember us talking about this at the second or third interview, whatever. Did you remember us talking about this thing? And this is the stuff that you said that you promised me that you would do. Well, let's go with it. Are you doing these things? And then what you find is they know they're not doing them. Many a time when I would have to part company with people is that afterwards, at the end of the day, after that all occurred, is that we would go out and have beers together. And because it wasn't about me, like dominating and mastering them. It was about the clear expectations. And they know that I never had anybody get canned that didn't expect it. And so it takes all that emotion out of it. So that way you don't have to deal with it. Because it was always hard. I had to get rid of one of my best friends one time. But that way you don't have to suffer through that. And also they don't have to suffer through that. Because if you like them to bring them in, you probably like them anyway. So it's not about torturing and revenge and all the rest of that stuff. It's everybody taking responsibility. And that is a problem I see all around, and I see it now in a couple of places exceptionally. And that is, if you're the leader, you take responsibility. When we win, when things go good, we all win. Okay. When things go bad, that's my error. That's not okay. That's not there. Or I goofed up there. There's something I didn't make clear, or there's something I didn't establish. So that way, that keeps you out of that big me, little you.
We'll get back to the program in just a moment, but first I wanted to tell you about our group called License to Coach. It's not really a company per se, but it is a group of people that are ready to help you as an individual or your team or your company with your leadership development needs. And we do that a couple of different ways. One's rather unusual in that we bring in a bank of actors, including myself, and we subcontract with your trainer of choice and help make role plays more realistic by making them real plays. In other words, the actors play the employee so that the person who's trying to practice a new skill is interacting with someone that's a little bit more realistic. We try to make the role plays more realistic so they can become more impactful for you as a student. But that's not where it stops. We actually provide a lot of contactless services as well. As is popular these days, we're trying to come up with ways that we can help you with your development without having to have any close contact. And the internet makes that possible. We offer assessments as well as 360 reviews that are all done online, as well as the feedback is done online by yours truly. It's something I'm very excited to offer, and I think it'll be of real interest to not only individuals, but also small businesses, because we try to offer these services at small business price, friendly to small businesses. So check it out. You can find us on Facebook under the title of License to Coach. You can also find it on my webpage, frankrwilson.com. Just look at the top for License to Coach, and that'll take you to the page. That's frankrwilson.com and License to Coach. Look it up. We'd be delighted to help you. What did you find was the toughest part of being in a leadership role? What was the most difficult thing?
I think probably the most difficult thing was that because I want everybody to succeed. And, and I know that you can do it if you work and learn. Okay. So I want everybody to succeed. And so when I would see people not doing it, like we were just describing the things, here's what you need to do to succeed. You want to do this? Yeah. Okay. Go for promise? Yeah. Okay. Is that to see people not do the things that will help them succeed. And they just fail. That like they choose they're actually making a choice to fail. And that was hard. That took a lot of getting used to. And matter of fact, that's probably where the established written down consequences came from. Was to take me out of that. That was hard because I know you. I mean, we talked. I've done a lot of stuff. Made it up as I go along. Okay, so I know you can do things. You just have to really and truly do it and have a plan.
Did you? There were certain times in your career, I guess, and I think we had talked about this before, where you actually were kind of in business for yourself, or actually, operating a small business, correct?
Well, commission sales, which all of this commission sales is in business, but for yourself. Yeah.
Well, and the reason why I say that is that I think you're qualified to answer this. I'm just kind of curious because some of our listeners are either entrepreneurs or looking to start a business and those sorts of things. I'm just curious from your perspective and your experience, what advice would you have for people that are either budding entrepreneurs or people that are already gotten started?
Well, have a plan. As I think and I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but write it down. What your expectations are, and have that computer. And the other is to train yourself. Train yourself constantly. You have there's another corny phrase of which I know a gazillion is that quit learning, you quit earning. That is absolutely true. So
I like that phrase.
Go good. You hadn't heard it? Well,
I hadn't. So I'm curious then. What I think I know what you'll say, but it's worth asking anyway. What did you find was your best learning tool? What was the thing that seemed to work best for you that others may benefit from?
Well, I picked up something from a guy whose name is Brian Tracy. Ran for governor of California at one time. But a great trainer. He was a trainer in the radio biz, but his stuff is much wider than that. As a matter of fact, at the end, if we can, I've got a couple of reading list things that I'd like to describe. But here's what he referred to them as smarter goals. And smarter goals are this: specific. So this is stuff to write down. Specific. What it is you're going to do. Not, I'm going to be a success. I'm going to build something by something. Okay, so it's specific goals, measurable goals, so that you can actually put a pen and pencil to it.
Right.
It's action related, so it means something you're going to do, not something you're going to conceptualize.
Something tells me this is spelling a word.
Yeah, yes, it is, and you're getting smarter, Frank. Realistic. And then time bound. And the probably biggest of the whole thing is time bound. Did you say, okay, here's what it is. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be a success. Even if you do all the other stuff, I'm going to be a success. By early next year. That's not a goal. That's not a goal. I'm going to be a success according to these other things I wrote down on January 14th at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, that's a real goal.
Yeah. Well, and what did you tell people? Let's say if they wrote a good, smart goal, and for some reason, they didn't meet it. They didn't meet it, but there was an effort put forth to meet it. What's the message there to someone?
Well, again, the message, first of all, to the leader is that did you inspect it as you were going along? Because if I got a goal that's going to be 3 months out, the time for me to check, to help, which is what checking is. Time for me to check is not 3 months in and say, oh, too bad, you blew it. No. It's all along, so that way you can give honest feedback. Because if you don't give people honest feedback, which is another difficult thing to learn to do, is if you don't give people honest feedback and then they fail, well, then that's a lot of it. That's your fault because you did not really help them by not telling them.
Yeah. So as far as for maybe getting started, I got the impression from you that you're really big on goal setting and having a business plan, I guess, as to what it is you're going to do and how you're going to do it.
Yeah. Even if you write a business plan, okay, and write it out, and then you throw it in your desk drawer and don't look at it again, that is 10 times better than never sitting down and doing it.
Yeah, because when I owned my own business, I had put together a business plan, and it was very, I don't know what the word is. It was a combination of disappointment, but also validating that some of the things in the business plan did come true that I wanted to do, and some of them didn't. But it helped refocus me a little bit by looking back at it occasionally. So yeah, I understand the value of that.
Well, it's a map. If you're out in the wilderness, which is what a lot of stuff we're talking about, entrepreneurship and building things out of scratch and all that. If you're out in the wilderness and you don't have a map, how are you going to know where you are, and how are you going to know where you're going, and how are you going to know how you're going to get there?
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. Do you, knowing what you know now, and that the fact that you've had a lot of experience, anything you would have done differently?
I probably would have left the railroad sooner. It was a great 20 years. It was working outside. I liked all of that, out in the weather. But it took up a whole lot of time.
Well, it sounds to me like it was also as a family legacy issue too that made it more difficult to quit, I'm sure.
Yeah, and also I've always been a big fan of learning. I ended up graduating high school when I was 15, started college when I was 16. And let me tell you what, that was a mistake. My dad used to say I majored in two things, pool and women, and got master's degrees in both. Well, and as a result of that, I went to work on the railroad because that's about what I could do.
Oh, wow. Excuse me. What, I guess finally I would, not finally, but I'd be curious your observations, because you've obviously worked with a lot of people who were perhaps overseeing you, or they were your leader. And you've read a lot. You're very well read and educated on leadership and things of that nature. Are there any role models out there that you admired, and what was it about them that you got from them? And it could be someone, famous that we all know, or could be, someone else that we don't know.
Well, actually there's quite a few, but the ones that stick out the most, and I mentioned this before, Brian Tracy.
Right.
He has an audio series, if you must, called Psychology of Achievement, which I think was instrumental. Peter Wilkins was a guy that I worked with at the insurance company I was at. He was one of those guys who really cared about his staff, paid attention, made sure that they were getting development, and then held you accountable to the goals that you said that you wanted to accomplish. So Peter was a big one. Another guy who wrote 2 books that I would highly recommend, Maurice Sheckman. Maurice Sheckman was all this talk that I've been a lot about accountability and clear feedback.
Right.
Those are from Maurice Sheckman. And Maurice Sheckman's 2 big books, they're not big, but they're impactful, is number one is Working Without a Net, and that's followed up by Fifth Wave Leadership. The 2 books work in tandem. I've offered, not anymore, I'm not working, but I've offered all through my career that people get these books, or if they work for me in the insurance business, it's like, you go get these books. But if you didn't like them, I would buy them back for you at a 50% increase. So if you paid $10 for it, you got $15 back. I never bought a book back from anybody. Which will make you bold, because again, once you know what's happening. John Maxwell, who's kind of a famous guy, used to be a pastor, found out he could make more money lecturing. That's true. Yeah, John Maxwell, he's got a gazillion books, but the 2 biggies are the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and the second one is the 17 Indispensable Laws of Teamwork. But those what is it, 5 things I think are incredibly important. And Working Without a Net, entrepreneurs, Working Without a Net is the book you want. When my daughter went off to college, and ended up, if I can brag, graduating magna cum laude from Harvard, that when she went off, I gave her this book. And I said, you read this book. And she did. And she's now recommended to other people. She's got a fancy job now out on the East Coast. But but those books, Working Without a Net, is the number one thing that everybody needs to read. And again, it's available on audio. It's abridged. Oh, I don't have time. I'm too busy posting on Facebook. Give me a break. Working Without a Net, Maurice Sheckman.
These days, there's almost no excuse. The technology affords us the opportunity to, whenever you got 10 minutes here or there, something that can be instantly available to you. I mean, like what you're describing, it could be you could have it saved on your phone and it's an audio book and you can listen to a chapter while you're waiting for an appointment or something. I mean, it's not impossible anymore.
Or you take the hard copy, stick it in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Because there's something, there's my wife's a fancy school teacher and many different things. But anyway, there's a tactile thing is when you hold something in your hand and you're inputting information through your eyes, that the 2 things will connect in your brain. They'll form a connection. And that's a good thing too, because I told you I knew 1,000 corny phrases about excuses. I'll get these. Mark Twain, he said, there's 1,000 excuses for failure, but there's never one good reason. And the other one was, who wrote Tarzan? Edgar Rice Burroughs. We said 40 million reasons for failure, but not a single excuse.
No. I would like to ask you, because I think just from my observations, I'm guessing you were able to establish a pretty decent work-life balance, which is an issue that's of a particular interest of mine. Any tips that you would have for leaders and entrepreneurs too? Owning your own business can be consuming, believe me.
Yes, it certainly can.
Any ideas that you have or suggestions in terms of trying to keep things in perspective and make sure that you have some sort of, you'll never reach balance, not 50% work, 50%, personal life. It's always going to be out of whack. How do you harmony, I guess, is what I'm looking for, work-life harmony.
Okay, well, because at one point I had 42 salespeople working directly for me, or with me is what I really meant to say, is that I would, and they were on the phone all the time. And so here was the deal, is that you can call me anytime in the morning, but at 10 o'clock, it's shut off. Okay. So with that as a parameter is that I always woke up early, get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get your coffee made, have a sip of it, check your emails or whatever it is you need to do. Don't get on there and just BS on Facebook. And then, well, it's true. And so then because nobody else out there is really awake and doing stuff at that time, so you don't get interrupted all the time. So that's a big part of it. Is get up early, then really work, and then the other part of it is make sure you take vacations. Because you can, success is addictive. And so, like, hey, this is going good. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do, it's more, it's addictive. Take vacations. If you don't make yourself take vacations, you are not going to, refresh your brain and your life. And, which is, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your spouse, because you're no fun to be around. So I would say, get up early. Work when you're supposed to be working, and absolutely, positively, take vacations.
Good advice. Good advice. Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, I mean, now you're currently retired, but that doesn't mean you're taking it easy. I'm fascinated at some of the things you do, and I just thought it'd be worthwhile kind of bringing up briefly. I mean, you and I both share the interest in acting, and have had some successes here and there with commercials and TV and stuff like that. But the thing that I found most interesting was that you have developed a passion for photography. Was that something that developed only since retirement, or was that going on long before?
Oh, it's like probably all of us, we've always taken pictures. And then before I was getting ready to retire, which is, I did this. I went to Paris, because take vacations. Did you hear me say that? Is that I went to Paris and I took this one picture. I thought, boy, that looks like a watercolor. And I got back and I did a whole bunch of work in Photoshop, which I learned after I got back, and I made it look like a watercolor. And then I had it burned into tiles, and then I built frames for it. And then, to my great surprise, somebody bought it for me for $800. And it's like, well, this is pretty cool. And so I did some of the swamps around here also on tile. And so that's where it really took hold. And then I went to an art show where one of my pieces was hanging, the swamp stuff. And I developed friendships with artists. And then that led to learning stuff about art and learning about color balance and all the rest of that stuff. So it's just that thing again, stay curious.
Yeah. And for those of you that are interested, either in the books that Rick has mentioned or in seeing some of his photography, which I would encourage you to do and explore, just look on our Facebook page for under Licensed to Coach, and I'll try to have some information there about the books that he recommended, as well as where you can see his photographs. Rick, we're just about out of time. I can't thank you enough. Is there anything in closing that you think would be important to mention to our audience and maybe I've missed?
No, I would like to recap with write it down with time limits, and then Working Without a Net by Maurice Sheckman. Those are two big. Write it down.
Excellent.
You got that, Frank? Write it down.
Yeah, excellent. Something tells me I've heard that before. Hey, listen, Rick, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I've certainly enjoyed it. I hope you have.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Good deal. Again, I think you have some sage advice there that I hope our listeners will take to heart. These are the kinds of things that can certainly make your leadership journey or getting into business for yourself perhaps a little bit easier if you follow some of this advice. So thanks again for joining us, Rick, and thank you to our audience. We appreciate you joining us today. Again, look for any kind of updates on our Facebook page or Instagram page, Licensed to Coach, if we've got anything going on or some helpful tips. We'll be posting them on there as well. And with that, there's only one thing left to say. That's simply this. My name is Frank R. Wilson. My time's up. I thank you for yours. Thanks for listening. to license to coach.